10 years ago, my husband served me divorce papers in the ICU, claiming my paralysis made me a liability to his image. He thought he had destroyed me. Last week, I walked into his wedding with the daughter he abandoned, and his perfect world crumbled. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The sound of the machine was the first thing I registered. Beep, beep, beep. A rhythmic, synthetic metronome that seemed to be counting down the seconds of a life I no longer recognized. My eyelids felt like they were weighted down with lead, and when I finally managed to pry them open, the harsh, fluorescent lights of the intensive care unit stabbed at my retinas, forcing me to squint. I tried to move. It was an instinct, a simple command sent from my brain to my limbs, something I had done billions of times before without a second thought. Shift your leg, turn your hip. Nothing happened. A cold, suffocating wave of panic washed over me, more painful than the throbbing headache that pulsed behind my temples. I tried again, focusing all my mental energy on my toes, my ankles, my knees. It was like shouting into a void. Below my waist, there was only silence. A terrifying, heavy silence. Lauren. The voice was familiar, but it lacked the warmth I desperately needed in that terrifying moment. It was clinical, detached. I turned my head slowly, the neck brace restricting me, to see Connor standing at the foot of the bed. He looked impeccable. That was the first thing my foggy brain latched onto. While I was lying there broken, hooked up to tubes and wires, smelling of antiseptic and fear, Connor was wearing his charcoal gray bespoke suit, the one he saved for high-stakes litigation. His tie was perfectly knotted. His hair was coiffed. He didn't look like a husband visiting his wife after a catastrophic car accident. He looked like a lawyer arriving for a deposition. "Connor," I croaked, my voice sounding like gravel grinding together. My throat was parched. I can't feel my legs." He didn't rush to my side. He didn't take my hand. He didn't offer me water. Instead, he checked his watch, a heavy gold Rolex I had bought him after he made partner, and then sighed, a sound of impatience rather than sorrow. "I know," he said, his tone even. "The doctors explained the extent of the spinal injury. It's a T12 fracture, complete severance. You're paralyzed, Lauren." He said the word paralyzed the same way he might say insolvent or guilty. It was just a fact to be filed away. Tears welled in my eyes, blurring his sharp silhouette. I need you," I whispered, the reality crashing down on me. "I'm scared, Connor," they said. "Is it permanent?" "Likely," he said. He finally moved, but not towards me. He walked to the small chair in the corner, picked up his leather briefcase, and set it on the rolling table usually reserved for hospital meals. The click of the briefcase latches sounded like gunshots in the quiet room. "Connor, what are you doing?" I asked, my heart rate monitor picking up speed. Beep, beep, beep. He pulled out a thick document, stapled and flagged with yellow sticky notes. He smoothed it out on the table, took a pen from his inner pocket, and looked at me with eyes that were devoid of any soul. "Lauren, we need to be pragmatic," he began, using his courtroom voice, persuasive, firm, and utterly lacking in empathy. "I've just made partner. The firm is looking at me to lead the international merger division. It requires travel, galas, endless social appearances. It requires a certain image." I stared at him, the drugs in my system making it hard to process his words. "Image." "Yes," he said, tapping the paper. "A vibrant, dynamic power couple. I cannot have my life anchor weighed down by this." He gestured vaguely at my immobilized body. "I cannot be pushing a wheelchair through the Vienna Opera House, Lauren. It signals weakness. It signals burden. It's simply not useful to the trajectory of my career." The air left my lungs. "Useful?" I repeated, the word tasting like bile. "I'm your wife, Connor. I was driving your car to pick up your dry cleaning when the truck hit me." "And that was unfortunate," he cut in smoothly. "But circumstances have changed. Drastically. I've drafted a dissolution of marriage agreement. Given your condition, you'll obviously need long-term care, which I am not equipped to provide. The firm's insurance will cover the basics, but I need you to sign this now to expedite the separation of assets before the medical bills become complicated. He stepped closer, holding the pen out toward my trembling hand. You're leaving me, I gasped, the shock numbing the physical pain. Here, now. I'm unburdening us both, he corrected. You can focus on your wreck. Over why, such as it is, and I can focus on my future. You're a smart woman, Lauren. You know how the law works. If you fight me, I'll drag this out until the legal fees eat up whatever settlement you might get from the trucking company. Sign it, and I'll give you a lump sum to get settled in a state facility. He wasn't a husband anymore. He was a shark smelling blood in the water. I won't sign, I whispered, gritting my teeth. You will, he said, leaning down, his cologne, sandalwood, and ambition suffocating me. Because if you don't, I will prove that you were driving distractedly. I will make sure you get nothing. You are no longer useful to me, Lauren. Don't make yourself a liability. He placed the pen on my chest, right over my heart. The cold plastic burned through the thin hospital gown. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. The days that followed were a blur of agony and bureaucratic cruelty. I didn't sign the papers that first day, but Connor was relentless. He didn't visit again, but his associates did. They came in shifts, like vultures circling a carcass, dropping off updated drafts, subtle threats, and reminders that my bank accounts had been frozen, pending litigation. I lay there, trapped in a body that wouldn't obey me, watching my life being dismantled by the man I had spent 10 years building up. I remembered the nights I stayed up until 4:00 a.m., proofreading his briefs when he was a junior associate. I remembered the dinner parties I catered myself to impress his bosses, charming the wives of senior partners while Connor took all the credit. I remembered paying off his student loans with my inheritance from my grandmother. Now, I was just a line item on a spreadsheet he wanted to delete. A week later, I was transferred. Connor had made good on his threat. Because I hadn't signed immediately, he used his legal leverage to have me moved from the private hospital to a state-funded rehabilitation center on the outskirts of the city. The difference was stark. The walls were peeling beige paint, the air smelled of bleach and boiled cabbage, and the staff were overworked and exhausted. Mrs. Reynolds, a nurse called out, walking into my shared room. It's just Lauren, I said, staring at the ceiling. I didn't want his name anymore. Lauren, you have a visitor. He says he's your attorney, but... She looked skeptical. My heart jumped. I didn't have an attorney. I couldn't afford one. Connor had cut off access to our joint funds, and my personal savings were meager. But it wasn't an attorney who walked in. It was Connor again. But this time, he wasn't alone. He was accompanied by a notary public. It's time, Lauren, Connor said, standing at the foot of the bed, looking out of place in the dingy room. I've liquidated the house. The contents are in storage. I need your signature to release your half of the equity so you can afford to stay here. He looked around the room with a sneer of disgust. Though frankly, I thought you'd have more dignity than to end up in a place like this. You put me here, I spat, my voice gaining a little strength. You froze the accounts. Strategic asset protection, he shrugged. Sign the papers, Lauren. Take the payout. It's a generous offer considering you'll never work again. I looked at the document. It was a complete surrender. I would get a small cash settlement, barely enough to cover 2 years of care, and he would keep the portfolio, the future earnings, the reputation, and the life we built. My hand hovered over the paper. I was exhausted. I was broken. I had no fight left in me, or so I thought. If I sign this, I asked quietly, you disappear. I never see you again. That is the goal, he said coldly. I have a reputation to maintain. A crippled ex-wife doesn't fit the narrative. I signed. My signature was shaky, a jagged scrawl that looked nothing like the confident autograph I used to have. Connor snatched the papers before the ink was dry. He nodded to the notary and they turned to leave. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't look back. He just checked his phone, probably texting his next appointment. As the door clicked shut, I placed a hand over my stomach. A secret fluttered there. A tiny, impossible spark of life that the doctors had discovered only yesterday during a routine blood panel. I hadn't told Connor. I hadn't told anyone. In his rush to erase me, in his arrogance to secure his assets and his image, Connor had looked at the spreadsheets, the bank accounts, and the property deeds. He had calculated every variable of my usefulness. But he had forgotten one crucial thing. He hadn't asked for a medical update since the first day. He didn't know about the baby. I watched the door where he had vanished, and for the first time since the accident, I didn't cry. I felt a cold, hard resolve crystallize in my chest. He thought he was discarding a broken woman. He had no idea he was creating his own. Worst enemy. To understand the depth of Connor's cruelty, you have to understand the depth of my sacrifice. When we met, Connor wasn't the slick, high-powered shark in a bespoke suit. He was a frantic law student drowning in debt, terrified of failing the bar exam. I was the one who made him flashcards. I was the one who worked 2 jobs, one as a paralegal and one as a transcriptionist, to pay our rent so he could study unpaid internships. I was the architect of his confidence. When he felt small, I built him up. When he was overlooked, I strategized his networking. I smoothed his rough edges, taught him which fork to use, and bought him his first decent suit. I poured myself into him until I was empty, believing that we were a single vessel. That was why the betrayal didn't just break my heart. It erased my identity. 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized, I was still in the rehabilitation center, struggling to learn how to maneuver a wheelchair. My body was healing, but my spirit was treading water. Then I had a visitor. I expected it to be a process server or perhaps a creditor. Instead, the door swung open to reveal a woman in a Chanel tweed suit, clutching a pristine Birkin bag like a shield. Victoria, Connor's mother. She didn't look like a grandmother to be. She looked like a CEO arriving for a hostile takeover. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe chignon, and her eyes, the same icy blue as Connor, scanned the room with unconcealed revulsion. "Well," she said, her voice dripping with faux pity, "this is quaint." "Hello, Victoria," I said, gripping the armrests of my wheelchair. "Did Connor send you?" "Connor is busy," she dismissed, pulling a disinfectant wipe from her bag and cleaning the plastic chair before sitting on the very edge of it. "He's celebrating. The merger went through. He's the youngest senior partner in the firm's history." A pang of bitterness shot through me. That was our dream, my dream. "Good for him," I said tightly. "It is," she agreed. "And it's good for the family name, which brings me to why I'm here." She leaned forward, her perfume, something heavy and floral, cloying in the small space. "Lauren, dear, we need to ensure that this chapter is fully closed. Connor mentioned you looked unwell when you signed the papers. We want to make sure you don't get any ideas about contesting the settlement later based on emotional distress or some other frivolous claim." "I signed the papers, Victoria. It's done." "Good," she said, smoothing her skirt. "Because Connor has a very bright future. He's seeing someone new, someone suitable, a senator's daughter. She plays tennis. She skis. She fits the life Connor deserves." The implication was clear. She walks, you don't. "I'm sure they'll be very happy," I said, my hand instinctively drifting to my stomach. I was 3 months along now. I was terrified, but I was also fiercely protective. Victoria's eyes narrowed. She was a predator just like her son. She noticed the movement of my hand. "You're gaining weight," she observed critically. "Hospital food, I assume. You really should watch that, Lauren. Just because you're in a chair doesn't mean you should let yourself go completely. It's tragic enough as it is." She stood up, looming over me. "Connor needs a clean slate. No baggage, no lingering attachments to a tragic past. You understand, don't you? It's best if you simply disappear, go back to your parents in Ohio, fade away." She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. "Here, a little extra. Consider it a severance package from the family. Use it to move far away." She dropped the envelope on my lap. It felt heavy. "I don't want your money," I said. "Take it," she sneered, her mask slipping. "You're a cripple, Lauren. You have no husband, no career, and no future. Don't let pride make you stupid. You were a good stepping stone for Connor, but the climb is over for you." She turned and walked out, her heels clicking rhythmically down the hallway. I stared at the envelope. Inside was a check for $10,000, enough to leave town, enough to vanish. They thought I was pathetic. They thought I was a stepping stone to be discarded now that I had served my purpose. Victoria had come to gloat to ensure the baggage was truly gone. I picked up the check. I didn't tear it up. I folded it carefully and placed it in the pocket of my sweatpants. "A stepping stone," I whispered to the empty room. I looked down at my stomach. "No," I told the tiny life growing inside me. "We aren't a stepping stone. We're the avalanche." The check from Victoria sat on my nightstand for 3 days. $10,000 to erase my existence. For those 3 days, I stared at the ceiling of the State Rehabilitation Center, listening to the agonizing grunts of other patients relearning how to walk, how to eat, how to live. I was drowning in a sea of self-pity, so deep I couldn't see surface. I was pregnant, paralyzed, and penniless. The logic of Connor's world, that value is determined by utility, had started to seep into my own mind. Was I just broken goods? Then the morning sickness started. It was a violent, wretched heaving that left me gasping for air, clutching the cold metal rails of my bed. As I wiped my mouth, trembling, a nurse named Sarah came in to change my IV. She was older, with tired eyes and a grip like iron. She saw the check. She saw my tears. "Honey," she said, her voice rough like sandpaper. "You can use that money to run away and die quietly, or you can use it to buy a shovel and dig your way out of hell. But you can't do both." That was the turning point. The switch didn't flip instantly. It was a slow, grinding gear change, but it turned. I didn't cash the check to leave town. I cashed it to buy a laptop and a specialized voice-to-text software. I used the rest to hire a ruthless physical therapist who didn't care about my tears, only my results. 7 years, that's how long it took to build the trap. I didn't just survive, I evolved. I had been a transcriptionist and a paralegal, yes, but before I met Connor, I had been a biology major. I understood mechanics. I understood the body. My frustration with the clumsy, archaic wheelchairs and braces available to me sparked an obsession. I began sketching designs, exoskeletal supports that utilized kinetic energy. I poured my rage into blueprints. I reached out to an old professor. He saw the potential. We got a grant, then a startup incubator, then a Series A funding round. By the time my daughter, Leona, was 6 years old, I wasn't just Lauren Reynolds, the discarded wife. I was L.R. Sterling, the reclusive founder of Kintix, a biotech firm revolutionizing mobility aids. I could walk now. It wasn't perfect. I used a pair of sleek carbon fiber leg braces of my own design that fit under a pantsuit, but I was upright. I was standing. And Connor, I watched him. I treated his life like a case file. I had a Google alert set for Connor Reynolds. I watched him make partner. I watched him buy a penthouse. I watched him cycle through girlfriends, always blonde, always wealthy, always discarded when they stopped serving his narrative. But the real investigation began when the alert popped up on my phone 3 months ago. Connor Reynolds to wed heiress Camilla Vance in lavish estate ceremony. Camilla Vance, the daughter of a shipping magnate, she was 24. Connor was 42. I looked at her picture. She had kind eyes and a smile that didn't reach the corners, the smile of someone trying very hard to please everyone around her. She looked exactly like I did 10 years ago. "Imam." I spun my chair around in my home office, a glass-walled sanctuary overlooking the city skyline, a far cry from the peeling paint of the rehab center. Leona stood in the doorway. She was 10 now, tall for her age, with Connor's dark curls and my stubborn chin. She was brilliant, fierce, and entirely mine. She knew her father had left before she was born, but I had spared her the cruel details. I wanted to protect her heart until she was strong enough to understand the nature of wolves. "What is it, Leo?" I asked, softening my voice. "Why are you looking at him again?" She pointed to the screen, where Connor's engagement photo was plastered across a society page. "Because Leo," I said, closing the laptop. "Sometimes, to fix a mistake, you have to study it first." I wasn't just studying him anymore. I was hunting. I had hired a forensic accountant, Marcus, a man who could find a penny dropped in the ocean. I needed to know why Connor was marrying a girl 20 years his junior. Was it love, or was it leverage? Marcus's report had arrived that morning. It was the key I had been waiting for. Connor wasn't just ambitious, he was underwater. His lavish lifestyle was a house of cards built on high-interest loans and leveraged assets. He had gambled on a massive class-action lawsuit 2 years ago and lost. He was drowning in debt, and the Vance family fortune was his life raft. But he had made a mistake. In his arrogance, he hadn't disclosed his true financial state to Camilla or her father. That was fraud. And I had the leverage. The divorce decree he forced me to sign, the one he drafted to strip me of everything. It contained a specific clause he had written to protect his future earnings from me, stating that any and all undisclosed debts or liabilities at the time of future union are the sole responsibility of the individual. He thought it shielded his money. Instead, combined with the proof of his current fraud, it was a weapon that could strip him of his law license. It was time to reintroduce myself. The invitation arrived in a heavy, cream-colored envelope with gold leaf lettering. It wasn't addressed to L.R. Sterling. It was addressed to Ms. Lauren Reynolds. He knew where I was, or rather, he knew Ray, I lived. I hadn't hidden my address, only my success. To him, I was likely still the struggling, disabled ex-wife living in a modest apartment, which I owned, along with the entire building. I stared at the RSVP card. To celebrate the union of Connor Reynolds and Camilla Vance. Included was a handwritten note on his personal stationery. "Lauren, I heard you're still in the city. I thought it would be a gesture of goodwill to invite you. It's going to be the event of the decade. Perhaps seeing what true success looks like will inspire you to finally do something with your life. No wheelchairs, please. The venue is historic and not accessible." I see. The cruelty was breathtaking. He wasn't inviting me to make peace. He was inviting me to gloat. He wanted an audience for his triumph, and who better than the woman he crushed? He wanted me to see his upgrade. I picked up my phone and dialed the number I hadn't called in a decade. It rang twice. "Connor Reynolds," he answered, his voice crisp, impatient. "Hello, Connor." There was a pause, a silence so thick I could hear the hum of the connection. "Lauren," he chuckled, a dry, condescending sound. "I didn't think you'd have the nerve to call. Did you get the invite?" "I did," I said, leaning back in my leather executive chair, looking out at the city lights. "It's a bold move, Connor, inviting the ex-wife. Isn't Camilla worried I might cause a scene?" "Camilla doesn't concern herself with the past," he dismissed. "And honestly, Lauren, I wanted you to see that I harbor no ill will. I've moved on. I've ascended. I thought maybe you'd want a decent meal. I assume the state disability checks don't cover filet mignon." My grip on the phone tightened, but I kept my voice smooth, like polished glass. "I'm actually doing quite well, Connor. I'm not on disability." "Oh, what is it then? Walmart greeter? Telemarketing?" He laughed at his own joke. "Look, if you need money for a dress, I can have my assistant wire you a few hundred. I don't want you showing up in rags." "I don't need your money, Connor, but I think we need to talk before the wedding. There are complications you aren't aware of." "Complications?" he scoffed. "The only complication is you thinking you still matter in my world. Listen, Lauren, I'm marrying into the Vance family. I am about to become untouchable. If you're calling to beg for an adjustment to the settlement, save your breath. You signed, your history." I'm not calling about the settlement, I said, letting a hint of steel enter my tone. I'm calling about the disclosure clause in our divorce papers. Article 4, Section 2. The one you wrote to ensure I couldn't touch your future assets. I remember my own contracts, he snapped. What about it? It works both ways, Connor. It mandates full financial transparency for any future marital unions to prevent liability bleed over. I'm curious. Does Camilla's father know about the $12 million in gambling debt you're hiding in the Cayman Shell Company? Or did you forget to disclose that? The line went dead silent. How? His voice lost its polish. It was a growl now. How the hell do you know about that? I know everything, Connor. I know about the loans. I know about the liquidity crisis at your firm. And I know you're marrying that poor girl to use her trust fund as a bailout. You listen to me, you crippled bitch, he hissed, the mask completely gone. If you breathe a word of this to anyone, I will bury you. I will sue you until you're living in a cardboard box. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I know exactly who I'm dealing with, I replied calmly. I'll see you at the wedding, Connor, and don't worry about the wheelchair. I'll be walking. I hung up before he could respond. My heart was hammering, not from fear, but from adrenaline. He was scared. For the first time in 10 years, the shark was afraid of the water. The week leading up to the wedding was a masterclass in desperation. Connor didn't attack me directly. He was too smart for that, knowing it would leave a trail, but he tried to seal the cracks. Marcus, my forensic accountant, tracked a flurry of activity. Connor was moving money, frantic wire transfers trying to make his accounts look solvent for a few days. He was robbing Peter to pay Paul, digging the hole deeper to survive the scrutiny of the wedding. But I wasn't just focused on the money, I was focused on the girl. I needed to know if Camilla was an accomplice or a victim. I found my answer 2 days before the ceremony. I arranged a chance encounter. I knew she frequented a specific high-end bridal salon for final fittings. I went there ostensibly to browse evening wear, dressed in a sleek, tailored suit from my own collection, standing tall in my braces. When Camilla came out of the dressing room, she looked exhausted. Her mother was berating her about the train length, and Camilla looked like she was about to shatter. I stepped in when her mother stepped away to take a call. It's a beautiful dress, I said softly. She jumped, startled. Oh, thank you, it feels heavy. Expectations usually are, I said. I'm Lauren. Camilla, she offered a tentative smile. Do I know you? We have a mutual acquaintance, I said carefully. I just wanted to say, make sure you're marrying him for the right reasons. Marriage shouldn't be a transaction. Her eyes filled with sudden tears. He says it's for our future. He says the prenup is just a formality to protect me, but he won't let my father's lawyers see his full financials. He gets so angry when I ask. She was a victim. He was gaslighting her, just like he had done to me. He was rushing the wedding to secure the funds before her father could finish due diligence. Trust your gut, Camilla, I said, handing her a card. It didn't have my name, just a QR code. If you ever feel like you're trapped, scan this. It contains information you deserve to know. I left before I could say too much. The QR code linked to a secure server hosting the redacted files of Connor's debt. I didn't know if she would look. I couldn't force her. But I had to offer the lifeline. The night before the wedding, I sat Leo down. Tomorrow is going to be a hard day, I told her. We were sitting on the plush velvet sofa in our living room. You're going to meet your father. Leo looked at me, her dark eyes serious. The bad man. He's not a monster in a storybook, Leo. He's just a man, a weak, selfish man who made a bad choice, but I need you to be strong. We are going there to stop him from hurting someone else. And we are going to show him that we didn't just survive, we won. I'm not scared, Leo said, lifting her chin. It was the exact gesture Connor used to make in court. The resemblance was haunting. I have you, and I have your legs. She tapped my carbon fiber braces. Yes, I smiled, kissing her forehead. We have each other. The morning of the wedding, the stakes escalated. Camilla hadn't canceled. The ceremony was still on. Connor must have talked his way out of it, or perhaps she hadn't looked at the files. I received a text from an unknown number. "Show up and I'll have security throw you out. Don't test me." He was terrified. I dressed in a bespoke emerald green gown that highlighted my standing posture. I put Leo in a matching dress. I wasn't going as a guest. I was going as the executioner. I checked my purse. I had the legal documents, the proof of his fraud, the proof of his hidden debts, and one more thing. The paternity test I had run years ago using a DNA sample from a discarded coffee cup I'd paid a pie to retrieve. Connor thought he was walking down the aisle to a fortune. He didn't realize he was walking into a courtroom. "Ready, Leo?" I asked, offering her my hand. She took it, squeezing tight. "Ready." We walked out to the waiting car. It was time to crash a wedding. The Vance estate was a sprawling, historic mansion that screamed old money. It was the kind of place where the grass was manicured with scissors and the air smelled of imported jasmine. As our car pulled up to the wrought iron gates, a security guard with a headset stepped forward, checking a clipboard. "Name?" he asked, not bothering to look up. "Lauren Sterling," I said, rolling down the window. He frowned, scanning the list. "I don't have a Sterling here. I have a do not admit order for a Ms. Reynolds." Connor, predictable to the bitter end. He had anticipated I might come as Lauren Reynolds, the broken ex-wife. He hadn't anticipated L.R. Sterling, the CEO. "I'm not on the guest list," I said, handing him a sleek black business card embossed with silver foil. "I'm here to speak with Mr. Vance regarding the immediate seizure of assets tied to the groom. Unless you want the federal marshals to crash the reception, I suggest you open the gate." The guard looked at the card, then at the confident woman in the back of the luxury sedan, and then at the little girl beside her who looked like she owned the place. The color drained from his face. He didn't radio ahead. He just opened the gate. We drove up the long, winding driveway. The ceremony was being held in the sunken garden. Rows of white Chayavari chairs were filled with the city's elite, judges, politicians, tycoons. At the altar, standing beneath an arch of white roses, was Connor. He looked the same as he did 10 years ago, handsome, polished, projecting an air of absolute control. But from this distance, I could see the sheen of sweat on his forehead. He was checking his watch. He was nervous. Camilla had just started her walk down the aisle. The organ music was swelling. The guests were standing, their backs to us. "Ready?" I asked Leo. "Let's go," she whispered. We didn't sneak in. We walked straight down the center aisle, trailing about 20 feet behind the bride. The sound of my heels on the stone. Path was rhythmic, authoritative. Click, click, click. The guests in the back rows turned first. A ripple of confusion started to spread. Who was this woman in the emerald gown? Who was the child? Then someone recognized me. Is that his ex-wife?" A woman whispered loudly. I thought she was. "Paralyzed," her husband finished. The whisper wave traveled faster than the bride. By the time Camilla reached the altar, the entire congregation was murmuring. The organist, sensing the tension, faltered and stopped playing. Silence descended on the garden, a heavy, suffocating silence. Connor looked up. He saw Camilla first, looking confused by the sudden quiet. Then he looked past her. His eyes locked onto me. For a second, he didn't comprehend what he was seeing. He was looking for a wheelchair. He was looking for a victim. Instead, he saw a woman standing tall, looking down on him from the top of the stairs leading into the sunken garden. "Lauren," he mouthed, the color vanishing from his face. I took a step forward, my hand resting gently on Leo's shoulder. "I apologize for the interruption," I said, my voice projecting clearly without a microphone. I had spent years in boardrooms. I knew how to command a room. But I believe there are some material facts that have been omitted from this merger. "Security," Connor shouted, his voice cracking. "Get her out of here. She's mentally unstable." But no one moved. The guests were paralyzed by the spectacle. Mr. Vance, the father of the bride, stepped forward from the front row, his face red. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded. I walked down the stairs, Leo matching my stride. We stopped 10 feet from the altar. "Mr. Vance," I said calmly, "my name is Lauren Sterling. 10 years ago, I was Lauren Reynolds. I was married to that man." I pointed a manicured finger at Connor. "When I was paralyzed in an accident, he served me divorce papers in the ICU because he said I was no longer useful to his image. He left me with nothing." "Lies," Connor screamed, stepping toward me. "She's lying, she's bitter." "I don't have to lie, Connor," I said, holding my ground. "I have the receipts." I turned to the guests, then back to Connor. "You invited me here to show off, didn't you? You wanted me to see your success. Well, here I am, and I brought someone I think you should meet." I gently nudged Leah forward. She stood there, small but mighty, looking directly at the man who had abandoned her before she took her first breath. She had his eyes. She had his nose. The resemblance was undeniable. It was like looking at a mirror image of Connor, stripped of the malice. "Leo," I said softly, but loud enough for the front row to hear. "That's your father." The gasp from the guests was audible. It sucked the air out of the garden. "That's impossible," Connor stammered, backing away as if Leo were a ghost. I don't have a child. You were." "Pregnant," I finished. "When you forced me to sign those papers, when you kicked me out of our home, when you told your mother to give me $10,000 to disappear, I was pregnant with your daughter." "I didn't know," he yelled, looking frantically at Camilla, then at Mr. Vance. "I swear I didn't know." "You didn't ask," I cut him off. "You were too busy calculating my liquidation value to ask if your wife was carrying your child. You didn't care if I lived or died, as long as I didn't drain your bank account." Camilla turned to him, her veil trembling. "Connor, is this true?" "No, baby, listen to me," he pleaded, grabbing her hands. "She's trying to sabotage us. She's jealous, look at her. She's clearly hired some kid to." "Don't," I warned, my voice dropping an octave. "Don't you dare call my daughter a hired prop." I turned to Mr. Vance. He didn't know about Leona, but he did know about the $12 million in debt he's currently hiding from you. I pulled a folded document from my clutch. Article 4, Section 2 of my divorce decree, the one Connor wrote. It mandates full disclosure of liabilities to protect future spouses. Since he failed to disclose his insolvency to you, and since he is using your daughter's trust as collateral for a high-risk loan he took out last Tuesday. This wedding is effectively a fraud scheme. I handed the document to Mr. Vance. Mr. Vance snatched the paper, he read it. His face went from red to purple. He looked at Connor with a gaze that could peel paint. "Is this true?" Mr. Vance asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Did you leverage Camilla's trust?" Connor opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked at me, then at the guests, then at the mansion he was about to lose. The trap had snapped shut. It was a bridge loan," Connor whispered, "just until the firm." "Slap." The sound echoed through the garden. Camilla had slapped him. It wasn't a tentative slap. It was a full-force, open-handed strike that knocked his boutoni. "Array askew." "You told me you were solvent," she cried, tears streaming down her face. "You told me you loved me, you just wanted the money." "Camilla, please." She turned to her father. "Daddy, get him out of here." Mr. Vance nodded to the security team, the real security team, big men in dark suits who had been standing by the perimeter. "Escort Mr. Reynolds off the property." "You can't do this," Connor shouted as two men grabbed his arms. "I have rights, I'm a partner." "Not anymore," Mr. Vance said coldly. "I'm the majority shareholder of your firm's parent company. Consider your partnership dissolved." Connor struggled, his composure shattering completely. As they dragged him past me, he dug his heels into the grass, looking at me with pure hatred. "You ruined me," he screamed, spittle flying from his mouth. "I made you, you were nothing, you were a cripple." I looked him in the eye, feeling absolutely nothing. No anger, no fear, just pity. "I wasn't nothing, Connor. I said, smoothing the fabric of my dress over my leg braces. I was just under construction. I looked down at Leo, who was watching him with a stoic expression. And as for being useful, I added, delivering the final blow. It seems I was useful enough to raise the heir you'll never get to know. The security guards hauled him away, his protests fading as they dragged him toward the gates. The garden was silent again. I turned to Camilla. She was weeping, her makeup ruined, her dream day destroyed. "I'm sorry," I said gently. "I know this hurts, but it's better than a lifetime of lies." She looked up at me, wiping her eyes. She looked at her father, then at me. She took a deep breath, pulled off her veil, and dropped it on the ground. "Thank you," she whispered. I nodded. I took Leo's hand. We turned around and walked back up the aisle, the sound of my steps, click, 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 marking the rhythm of my victory. The fallout was swift and total. In the world of high-stakes law and corporate finance, reputation is currency. Connor didn't just go bankrupt, he was demonized. Mr. Vance didn't hold back. He unleashed a team of auditors that exposed every corner of Connor's fraudulent life. The gambling debts, the shell companies, the embezzlement from client escrow, accounts to cover his lifestyle, it all came out. Within 3 months, Connor was disbarred. The penthouse was foreclosed. The bespoke suits were auctioned off. The last I heard, he was living in a studio apartment in a neighboring state, working as a paralegal for a strip mall firm that handled DUI cases. He had become exactly what he despised: small, irrelevant, and powerless. He tried to reach out once, a letter sent to my office. It wasn't an apology, it was a request for a loan. He appealed to the sake of our child. I burned it. He lost the right to that title the day he chose his image over her life. As for me, the wedding was a turning point, but not in the way the tabloids thought. They wanted to paint me as the vengeful ex-wife, the woman of steel who crushed her husband. But I wasn't interested in fame. I was interested in peace. A few weeks after the wedding, I stood on the balcony of my home, watching the sunset over the city. Leo was inside, practicing her violin. The music drifted out through the open doors, a sweet, melancholic melody that filled the air. I looked down at my legs. The carbon fiber braces were sleek, a testament to my engineering, but my legs themselves were strong again. I had spent years hating them, hating the accident, hating the weakness. But they had carried me here. They had carried me through the fire. "Imam." The music had stopped. Leo stood by the glass door. "Come here, Bug," I said. She walked out and leaned against the railing next to me. "Is he gone, for good?" She meant Connor. "Yes," I said, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "He can't hurt us, Leo. He never could. He was just a shadow, and shadows disappear when you turn on the light." "I'm glad," she said simply. "I like it better with just us." "Me too." I thought about the journey, the hospital bed, the cheap rehabilitation center, the check from Victoria. The nights I spent weeping, thinking my life was over because a man told me I was broken. I realized now that Connor was right about one thing: the accident had changed me. It stripped away the woman who needed validation, the woman who lived to serve someone else's ego. It left behind something harder, sharper, and infinitely more valuable. I wasn't useful to him because I was no longer a tool he could use. I had become the architect of my own life. My phone buzzed on the railing. It was an email from Camilla. She had started a foundation for women trapped in financially abusive relationships. She wanted to know if Kintix would be interested in partnering. I smiled and typed a quick reply: "Absolutely. Let's get to work." I put the phone down and looked at my daughter. "So," I asked, "her pizza or Thai food for dinner?" Leo grinned, the heavy atmosphere vanishing instantly. "Thai, definitely, but extra spicy." "You got it." We walked back inside together, leaving the sunset and the past behind us. I didn't need to look back. I knew exactly who I was, and I knew exactly where I was going. I was Lauren Sterling. I was a mother. I was a survivor. and I was, without a doubt, the most useful person in the room.